Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Holy and Hormonal podcast. My name is Kim Gargano. If you're new here, I created this podcast as a safe space for us to approach periods and our hormones from a Christian perspective. I'm so pumped for this episode. I'm going to be talking about 10 things that every woman should know about her hormones. There are a million things that I could list, but I kind of narrowed it down to the top 10. And in no particular order, I'm just going to run through these and give a brief explanation as to why you should care about them and how they affect just every aspect of your body. Thank you, Jesus, for another opportunity to sit down with these beautiful women, Lord. I thank you so much for today. I just pray that you use me to educate women, and I just pray that they find answers and find freedom and find healing in this episode, Lord. Would you just guide my mouth? And I just pray for everything that's being said to land on fertile soil, Lord, that you will grow and water. I pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen. Let's break it down a little bit more. Hormones are chemical messengers that travel through your bloodstream and go throughout everywhere in your body. You can think of them as like little mailmen. Hormones don't just give you a period, they support vital functions in your body like metabolism, sleep, mood balance. They can affect your mental health, your physical health, and they all work together to make you your happiest and healthiest. You could think of hormones as like an orchestra. And when one hormone is a little out of tune or playing a little too fast or a little too slow, it tends to throw off the rest of the orchestra. So that's why hormone balance is so important, because they're very sensitive. And when they get confused, they confuse all the other musicians in the orchestra. And something that I'm going to be referring to a lot is your endocrine system. What is your endocrine system? The endocrine system is the network of glands and organs that release hormones into your bloodstream. And like I said, hormones, which are these chemical messengers, influence processes like growth, metabolism, mood, immune function, and reproductive health. So parts of the endocrine system include your hypothalamus, your pituitary gland, your thyroid gland, adrenal glands, the pancreas, ovaries and testes in men, pineal gland, and parathyroid glands. When I'm referring to things like endocrine disrupting chemicals, that just means chemicals and toxins that interrupt the healthy communication between all these networks of glands and organs. So in no particular order, I'm just going to go through 1 through 10. The first one is your hormones do more than just give you a period. If you have metabolism issues, blood sugar issues, sleep issues, chronic stress, all of these things are related to hormones. Your gut health is also directly linked to hormone health. That kind of was said already, so let's just move on to number 2. The environment we live in makes it more difficult for our bodies to thrive. So if you think about it, back in the day, they just lived off of the land. They didn't really spray their crops with pesticides, herbicides. They didn't pump their cows and other animals with additive hormones and growth steroids. They didn't really have a lot of toxins in their air. They didn't have chemicals in their beauty and makeup products. They just lived off of the land, which is what we would consider now to be like organic, non-GMO. But since the boom of processed foods in our grocery stores from like the 80s and beyond, the things we ingest on a daily basis are filled with harmful chemicals for our body. From the food that we eat, to the skincare that we put on our face, to the products that we lavish our hair with. There are so many things filled with toxins and endocrine disrupting chemicals. The good news is you're not alone, and it's kind of impossible to fully avoid all of these toxins. But the bad news is that we're stuck living in a world where this is a reality, and around 70 to 80% of women struggle with hormone imbalance. What I want to say is living a life of sustainability and trying to live a toxin-free life has to be done gracefully. Like, do your sustainable best. Just do what you can, because this process can become very overwhelming, very intimidating, very expensive, and not everyone has the resources to just go cold turkey and like just ditch all of the harmful chemicals right now. So approach all these things that I'm saying with grace for yourself, because I don't even do this perfectly. I still use some makeup products that are very toxic. I still get my nails done at the salon, which is very toxic. The key thing is balance and awareness. So let's move on to number 3. Some of you guys are going to hate me for saying this, but overconsumption of caffeine is directly working against your hormones. Studies have shown that women who have an overconsumption of caffeine, they have chronically high levels of cortisol, and it can also increase the risk of infertility and miscarriage. So here's what happens in your body when you drink caffeine. Caffeine travels through your blood system and it blocks adenosine receptors in your brain. Adenosine is a neurotransmitter that promotes relaxation and sleepiness, but when blocked has a stimulating effect, making you feel more alert and awake. And what it does is it activates your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight, flight, freeze response, which is indirectly affected by that blockage, which signals then for your adrenal glands to produce cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and adrenaline, etc. Cortisol is produced, increasing your alertness, raising your blood sugar levels, and helps your body deal with stress in the short term. Like in the short term, cortisol is a very good thing. If you are being chased by a bear, cortisol and adrenaline are going to start flooding your body to help equip you to fight that bear or run away from that bear. But in the long term, if your body is constantly sounding this alarm system like danger, threat, we're in danger, 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 it's gonna put chronic fatigue on that fight or flight response system, which is known as adrenal fatigue. And when caffeine is consumed on an empty stomach, cortisol levels in the bloodstream spike because it perceives caffeine as a stressor. So when you have adrenal fatigue, it can either cause you to have increased levels of cortisol, which can increase the belly fat around your body, or it can cause you to rapidly lose weight, have no energy, and be chronically fatigued. And all this does too is put stress on your reproductive hormones. So you might notice when you're chronically stressed out, you have a lower libido, your periods might become irregular, you might not have a period at all. And drinking caffeine long term, like 2, 3, 4 cups a day for years, is just adding fuel to the fire. So what you can do is opt for like a green tea or a matcha. Don't drink caffeine on an empty stomach. Please do not drink caffeine on an empty stomach, and stop drinking caffeine after like 12 p.m. I think that sounds a bit reasonable. Number 4, blue lights from phones and TVs are disrupting your sleep. You may have heard this one before. I feel like it's kind of a hot topic in the wellness space, but blue light directly affects your sleep because here's how your brain associates light. Sunlight enters through your suprachiasmatic nucleus in your eye, which tells your body it's daytime. It gets your body functioning, it pumps you with energy, and it gets you ready for the day. As time winds down and the sun sets, your brain takes that signal of darkness as it's sleepy time, it's time to start relaxing, and it signals your pineal gland to produce melatonin around like 9 p.m. Melatonin is known as the sleepy hormone. It's what helps you fall asleep, stay asleep, and melatonin spikes at around like 2, 3 a.m. What happens when you're using blue lights or devices or even the overhead LED lights at night is your brain is signaling that light response with daytime. So it's not gonna encourage melatonin to be secreted, because in order for melatonin to be secreted, it needs to be converted from serotonin. So please, please, please use soft lamps at night. I literally, my bones quake when I see people using overhead LED white lights at night. It like pains my soul. So using amber or soft white lights as lamps, try to keep them at eye level because your brain also associates like the level at which the light is happening with. Like if you have overhead lights on, your body's going to be like, oh, it's the sun. But if it's eye level or lower, your body's going to be like, oh, it's sunset, time to wind down. So that's just like a little biohack there for you. Obviously, if you're going to be on your phone or watching TV, use blue light blocking glasses. And bonus points if you want to like read the Bible or do some journaling or meditation and prayer before bed. Number 5, your hormones are as healthy as your diet. You are what you eat in that sense. Your body is only going to be as healthy as the things you put in it and on it. When we're eating foods that help support our hormones, like carrots and fermented foods and sweet potatoes and beets and things like that, like the more organic we can eat, the more from the land we can actually eat. Fruits, vegetables, having healthy fiber, carbs, and protein on our plate, the healthier your body's going to respond, and you are only going to be as healthy as your diet. Number 6, daily movement is essential. Movement is beneficial for regulating blood sugar and insulin sensitivity, reducing stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, boosts mood-enhancing hormones like dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins, supports thyroid function and metabolic health, balances sex hormones like estrogen and progesterone, and improves sleep quality. I have had a very unhealthy relationship with working out in the past. I used to associate it with like punishment and something that it felt like a chore, and I was punishing myself with for either overeating or whatever situation I found myself in. But exercise is a gift that the Lord gives us. The Lord has really healed my relationship with this, and now I exercise from a place of gratitude, like, oh my goodness, I get to move my body, not I have to move my body. Everything has changed, and movement looks different, and I say that movement is a lifestyle because it could be like going to the gym and doing an actual workout, or just opting for the steps over the elevator or escalator. It's actively making conscious choices to do what seems a little bit harder and more inconvenient for a short amount of time so that your body can be strong and healthy for a longer amount of time. A healthy exercise schedule might look different for everyone, but for example, for me, I try to work out 3 to 4 times a week. So that looks like Pilates and strength training. Depending on where I'm at in my cycle, I'll either up the intensity or lower the intensity. And I try to take 2 15-minute walks a day, morning, afternoonish, and then evening. Try my best to get around 10 to 11,000 steps a day on top of the 3 to 4 weekly exercises. Brings me to number 7, less is more. We as women have a gift from the Lord of nurturing and providing and comforting, but it can quickly become a curse when we don't take enough time for ourselves and when we don't have enough boundaries in place to say no. Like I said before about adrenal fatigue, our body can only handle so much. We can only go so fast for so long before we crash and burn. And it is only the love of God that encourages us to rest in His presence. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and in me you'll find rest for your souls." So consider this your permission to take things slowly. Because at the end of the day, it's like, who is putting this pressure on us to get everything done? Most of the time, it's ourselves. So if we're the ones setting the bar for what we need to achieve, we can also lower that bar to be a little bit more reasonable and sustainable. And I guarantee you, when you start living from a place of less is more and slowing down and really focusing your 100% attention on one thing at a time, you will be more productive and more fulfilled. Number 8, your periods should not be debilitating. This one kind of blew my mind, but the more research that I've been doing, the more it checks out. PMS, though it's very common, is not normal in the sense of being in pain and discomfort being a normal thing. PMS as a general experience is a normal effect of being a woman. But if you are curled over the toilet, if you are making trips to the emergency room, if you are screaming in pain because of your period, that is not normal. If your period interferes with your daily life, like you have to skip school, call out of work, or cancel your plans, that's not normal and deserves medical attention. Everyone has different sensitivities to the fluctuating hormones from the follicular phase to the luteal phase, which is the first half of your cycle to the second half of your cycle. I myself, as a woman with PMDD, have a hypersensitivity to these changes to where it's neurological, and I really have a hard time with like depression and anxiety and anger and irritability when I'm about to get my period. So that's kind of what my PMS looks like in that sense, but other women might be different. Like you might have the most painful cramps in the world. You might have endometriosis, and when that cycle comes back around, you are in debilitating pain. Some of you might have ovarian cysts. And a few days before your period, it feels like someone is stabbing you in the stomach with knives, and you're like thinking that you have a rupture in your appendix. Every woman is different, but whatever it is for you, just take a mental note and say, is this affecting my daily life? Yes or no? And if they are debilitating, you need to see an OBGYN or a naturopath or a functional nutritionist to help relieve your symptoms. Because you do not deserve to live in pain like that. That is not normal. It's not what the Lord wants for you. It's not what anyone wants for you. And it's my job to sit here and tell you that you deserve to be seen, heard, diagnosed correctly, and validated in your pain. Number 9, you need to pay attention to your blood sugar. Blood sugar is like the creme de la creme of hormone health. And it's a sneaky one because you don't really think about blood sugar affecting anything other than increasing your chance of having diabetes. But blood sugar is so important. Blood sugar, aka glucose, is the fuel that keeps your cells alive and functioning. We need glucose to survive. Glucose comes from carbohydrates like flours, pastas, comes from fruits and other complex carbs like sweet potatoes. It is essential for our body to function optimally, but when it's overdone, it leads to a lot of issues. So your blood sugar levels are affected by your diet, your activity levels, stress, the microbiome, like the bacteria in your gut, and body fat. When glucose enters the bloodstream, the pancreas is alerted to release the hormone insulin. And you can think of insulin as the key that unlocks the door for your cells to take in that glucose to either use it as energy or to be stored as fat. Insulin is so crucial for our metabolic health and overall hormone health. So where we run into trouble is when we overeat on carbs. So let's say you only have a giant bowl of pasta for dinner. What that's going to do is increase the glucose in your bloodstream. So all of those carbs are going to break down and there's going to be a lot of glucose in your bloodstream. Insulin is going to work overtime to unlock the door to all the cells, for your cells to take in all that glucose to be used. But there's only so much room that your cells have to take in that glucose before it's overcrowded and they're like, nope, this hotel is filled, go somewhere else. So when that happens and the cells are like, we're full, insulin keeps rising to try to keep unlocking the door. But all that's going to happen is that glucose is just going to float in your bloodstream and it's going to raise your blood pressure. So if you've ever eaten like a hefty carb heavy meal, an hour or two later and your heart starts racing like crazy, this happens to me sometimes, that is evidence of glucose floating in your bloodstream. When this happens, it also leads to inflammation in your body. And when this is done over time repeatedly, that glucose can be stored in your body as visceral fat, particularly as fat in the abdomen. That visceral fat contains an enzyme that converts androgens, like male hormones like testosterone, into estrogen. That process is called aromatization. So if you're someone that already struggles with estrogen dominance, like PCOS and some forms of endometriosis, the more visceral fat that you have, the more estrogen is going to be produced because it's being converted from testosterone now. So estrogen is normally produced from your ovaries, but when we have more fat on our body, those fat cells also produce estrogen, only adding fuel to the fire of that estrogen dominance. So it's kind of like this hamster wheel of more estrogen and more estrogen and more estrogen, and your liver is having a harder and harder time getting rid of that excess estrogen. So blood sugar balance is so important for our overall reproductive health and hormone health. And this leads me to number 10. And number 10 is the good news that we have in Jesus, the good news that we have in doctors and medical professionals and practitioners and health coaches. Healing is possible. Everything that I just listed may sound like doom and gloom, but I promise you that healing is possible. God gave us herbs for the service of man. God gives us gifts and talents to help lead other people to wisdom and knowledge of how their body works. And God gives us food as medicine. I have watched the Lord do miraculous things in my body. I have heard stories of the Lord doing miraculous things in other people's bodies. So whatever hormonal imbalance you're dealing with, if it's hypothyroidism, if it's fibroids, whatever it is, and I don't know what the Lord's will for your life is when it comes to healing. It could be physical, it could be mental, it could be emotional, it could be a renewed mind. But I truly feel like the greatest healing of all is when you have unexplainable joy and hope and confidence in a situation that feels so impossible. So I am praying for your healing, whatever that looks like. Know that I am rallying behind you in prayer and believing in faith that you will find freedom. But also just know that we have a God who sits with us in our discomfort, who can relate to us, who came to this earth to bear the most excruciating death, was betrayed and riddled with pain in his body. So he knows what you're going through and he knows what it feels like. I don't want you to hear this and take this the wrong way. I don't know if you guys have watched The Chosen, but there's a scene in one of the earlier seasons where little James has a limp. And they were going around and they were doing all these miracles, and little James comes up to Jesus and is like, God, like, I don't really ask you for much, but like, why haven't you healed my illness yet? And Jesus is just like, how much more glory does your Father get? Knowing that you still praise him and worship him while you are dealing with this ailment. And I think about a friend I have in my life who was one of my bridesmaids, and she has CP, cerebral palsy. And when I look at her preaching the gospel, and I see her on stage, and I see the way that she's so fiercely in love with the Lord, knowing that she has this thorn in her side that she carries with her, it encourages my faith more than it would for me to see someone who has everything all together, who has every answered prayer, who has no struggles, who's preaching from the pulpit from a place of complete health and prosperity. I look at someone like my best friend and I'm like, she knows the Lord in a way that I want to know the Lord. And she trusts the Lord in a way that I want to trust the Lord. I'm not saying that that preacher who has it all can't do the same things. I'm just saying that it hits different when you see someone carrying the presence of God, proclaiming the goodness of God, when their situation does not, to the world, look good, per se. I hope that came across the right way, because it really shaped the way that I even view my own problems, like my own sicknesses and the things that I deal with. Rather than praying for every problem to go away, I started praying, Lord, how can you get more glory from this situation? How can I glorify you more through this? And that's a beautiful thing, but it's very hard to do. It's a very hard prayer to pray. So that is all I have for you today. As always, you guys can find me on Instagram at holyandhormonalpodcast, and my personal is at @KimGargano_. Have a beautiful rest of your week, and I will see you guys on Thursday.